rained last night a lot. Everything is soaking wet, and right now where I'm at, the temperature is below 48 degrees. You can't freeze to death at 48, but if the conditions are like this and you discover yourself in a bad situation, hypothermia can be a real problem. Hypothermia. Now, here in this part of the country, we have just a very few months where that's a concern. This happens to be the time of year that it is a concern. We're much more affected by hyperthermia. The summers are so hot and humid that it's extremely easy to get overheated. Now, I've collected a few little fire making materials in just a few minutes. Walked around and harvested standing deadwood, twigs and small stuff, and we're going to see if we can get a fire going here to ward off the chill. It's quite chilly out here. Now, I could use a bow drill to do this. I could use, given the right situation, right conditions, I could use a ferro rod to do this. I could use primitive flint and steel to do this. Any number of ways to create a fire. Now, what I want to say about that is practice the primitive and become proficient at it. On a day like today, you would be extremely hard pressed to make a friction fire from materials collected here in these woods. Ferro rod is a much greater possibility. There's ways to do that, and we'll be dealing with that in another video at some point. However, for all practical purposes, I'm cold, and I need to get a fire going to warm up by. Now, one of the other things I want to say is always carry on your person what you need to get a fire going. That's very important. It doesn't take up much room in your pocket. Don't throw away your Bic lighter. Don't throw away a box of matches. There's times when something like this is extremely valuable to have on your person. Let's see if we can't get something going here. This is some fat lighter, some fat wood that I've splintered up with my hatchet. And as you see, even fat wood can be a little tricky to get going. We may have to babysit it just a little bit to get the fire going. And then I'm going to start feeding it with some small little twigs. I don't want to suffocate it. It's got to have oxygen. Bear in mind, this is stuff that I just, dead standing that I've just picked. And we're gonna see if we can warm ourselves up here. I have not batoned anything. In my opinion, in the part of the world that we live in, batoning is not necessary. You can do it if you want to. I think maybe that's one reason why I have always had an aversion to batoning, is because in this part of the world where I've grown up, I've never had a difficult time. I mean, it's never been impossible for me to get a fire going just out of stuff that I could pick up in the woods, find in the woods around me. We've got the makings of a fire now. after a lot of rain last night. On a day like today, when everything is wet, and even the standing dead wood that you pick is damp, use a little more of the fat wood, a little more of the lighter. There really isn't a thing, there's no such thing as cheating when it comes to building a fire, especially when you need a fire in order to sustain your life. Being proficient with your skills and being able to do this same thing without striking a match or without using a big lighter is a wonderful thing. We need to be proficient in our skills. Proficiency in our skills and what I call bushcraft bravado are two entirely different animals. And don't go willy-nilly into the woods simply because someone has suggested that if you've not done this by friction, or if you've not done this by primitive flint and steel or with a ferro rod, that you're cheating when it comes to fire making. Now, don't let anybody buffalo you into thinking that unless you make a fire with some primitive way that you're cheating on your fire making. When you need a fire, you need a fire, and you need to be able to affect that fire as quickly as you can. Now, another thing that I want to suggest, and this is simply my experience, there's a lot of ways to build a fire lake. There's a number of ways to build a fire lake, and they're all good. What I've discovered in the environment where I live is that getting the fire going initially, especially when you're working with damp material, marginal material, my preference is to do this pyramid thing, because what it does, it works kind of like a chimney, and it pulls that heat up so that as the fire is burning down below, it's also drying out this damp or marginal material that's stacked up around it. Another thing about the pyramid is that it creates plenty of space for air. And, you know, it takes three things for a fire to live, and air happens to be one of them. We've got the makings of something that could save our life in a bad situation. We've got the makings of something that would sterilize water if we needed water to hydrate ourselves, which that's another life essential. Smoke likes to travel right to me. It's a beautiful thing. Get out, folks. Go explore. Enjoy the woods. Even on a day like today when the weather is less than cooperative with our particular interests. And I would also add on a day like today, days like today are especially good days to get out and practice your fire making skills. It's easy to make a fire when the wood is dry and all the conditions are pleasant. But when things go awry, when the weather gets a little messy, the game changes.